If you ask anyone who is obsessed with whitetails when is their favorite time of year to hunt, the majority will tell you without hesitation, November. Does are in heat all over the place, bucks are running wild with disregard for pretty much anything, and shot opportunities are oftentimes plentiful. Now, if you ask hunters who only go after giants, they might have a different answer altogether when it comes to targeting one specific mature buck. Late season is often overlooked by hunters due to the weather and hunting pressure from previous gun seasons, but it can be just as productive as the fall when it comes to targeting mature bucks. This was the case for one Ohio hunter, Dave Kopp, who harvested his giant non-typical in February of 2016.
The story on this one. My father-in-law owns a smaller farm in Alliance, Ohio, 46 acres. In the spring of 2015, I found some sheds. I went to him with these sheds, and I never found any real decent sheds. And these were 150, 60 class sheds, both of them within 15 yards of each other. And I said, please, this buck is going to be a giant next year. Can I hunt, this coming year? And he was adamant and said no. No. So it became September of that year in 2015, and there was a rub on a tree that was at least 8 inches in diameter, and I took him out in his side-by-side to show him that rub, and it was just shredded. And I said, it has to be that buck. It has to be. Once again, I asked him, could I hunt? No. And then it was about a week later, and I call it the email of all emails. In the email, he said, Dave, if you hunt only that buck, no does, just that big one, you can hunt out here. So I was ecstatic. I went out, I was very careful. I know the property well. There's a funnel, and he actually feeds them up by, they plant soy and corn, 15 acres of his property. And then he puts a camera and always a trophy rock, and then some corn out for pictures. I was trying to think of anything and everything to hunt that buck. Very careful with scent control. I became very meticulous. I saw a 3.5-year-old that in 15 during the rut that maybe normally I would have shot. He was in the low 140s. Nice buck. But I let him go because I knew there was a giant roaming somewhere. And then after the rut, it was over. I probably was out there 4 or 5 times, maybe 6 times during the rut. Because of the wind, making sure that was right. And I had given up. I said to one of my best friends, Brian Coons, I said, I can't believe it's over. That's how I felt. Like the rut has gone and passed. I never saw that big buck, and it's over. So I continue hunting, and I always harvest a couple does. My family loves venison. Harvested a couple does, and I'm down in Salt Fork, and this would be January 24th. The season ends February 7th. So January 4th, it was a Sunday, I come home to my computer and I look at the email, and my father-in-law had sent me a picture of this giant. And I looked at it and I said, I had never seen anything like that. I couldn't even count the points. He said, all it said was, Dave, I think this is the big one. I'm like, yeah, I think so too. So, I put a plan into measure. I immediately thought to myself, I've got to attract this deer. What do deer really love? It's white acorns. So I get online that night and I ordered white acorn powder from Vermont. It didn't come till Thursday, but I went out and I on Wednesday the wind was right. It had to be a northwest wind. I climbed up into a pin oak tree, and it's late January, nothing on the trees, and I was like sticking out like a sore thumb. As I stood sideways with my crossbow. 2 does came in, a mother and a yearling. The yearling came right up to the tree and sniffed the tree, and the mother was fine. And they took off, and then I climbed down and sprayed the tree down and walked out, sprayed my path. I was just very, very meticulous. And so that was Wednesday. Thursday, the white acorn powder comes. I go back out. I put some of that with the corn where he feeds them. And he was getting pictures every night of this deer. This deer was, I believe, emaciated from the rut. You think about it, he didn't have to fight whatsoever. And he was pretty run down, and he was hungry, trying to recover. That was on a Thursday, and the wind wasn't going to be right the whole weekend. I was very disappointed. And then it came to be I believe it was, well, I know it was February 1st, and I'm almost positive it was Monday. So before that, I'll back up a little bit. I had never hunted out of a blind, always in trees, always in climbers, always in, ladder stands, hang-ons, loved hang-ons, still love hang-ons. So my one buddy said, you've got this lake here. We can use that so that deer can't come behind you, and we'll put the blind up right against this lake, and then where the funnel is, where they come out and then head towards his feed, it was just a perfect spot, 25 yards from the brush where the funnel, where they came out of that funnel. And I had watched him numerous times through his spotting scope in the family room, just, take that path. So yeah, we set the blind up, brushed it in real nice, and that was on Thursday, and I didn't have the right wind until February 1st. I go out, about 2:30, I get there, and we decide for my father-in-law to take me in the side-by-side, because that's when, when he goes out and feeds the deer, he uses the side-by-side, same familiar noise, and we knew he wasn't far. He drops me off. On the way, kind of a funny story is, I was so, I was doing stuff just remember how amped I was to just every detail. I even took charcoal capsules, to help eliminate some scent. I was spraying everything down meticulously, washing everything meticulously. So on the way to the blind, I said to him, do you think I should duck down? Because it's always just you driving this side by side. Maybe he'll figure something is wrong. And he looked at me and said, do you really think they can effing count? And I just started dying laughing. And so that's one of the funnier stories. So he drops me off. I get in the blind. It's 3 o'clock. Last light is, so sundown was 5:41. Last shooting light was 6:11. So I'm sitting there, and it was the new moon. I didn't realize I knew none of that stuff. And it was getting dark. And I had the screen up in the blind, that little camo screen. And it had been out since Thursday, and he had seen it. Anyway, I'm sitting there, and, nothing. I didn't even see any does. It was horrible. And then finally, it had to have been around 6 o'clock. It was getting dark, and it was getting dark fast. And I could not see through that screen, because it was getting so I take the screen down. So I don't know, it was 6:05 maybe, but it was definitely getting dark, and I'm looking to the left and to the right. My peripheral vision catches movement, and he's 60, 80 yards out moving this way, and I couldn't tell it was him. I just see the large mass, and and then he's coming behind all the thick stuff, and then the little path he comes out of all the brush, where they all come out at. He stops before that, and I still, I'm thinking that's got to be him. I wasn't positive. And then finally, when he came up, and then he just frickin' stood right there and was staring right at my blind, just locked on my blind, and wasn't moving, straight on. There was no shot. I'm thinking to myself, oh God. And honestly, I would have missed with a compound bow. I was shaking so bad. And I was able to put my elbow on my knee to brace myself, and I was still shaking. And I think why he was staring at the blind was because I had taken that screen out, and it was something different. And then instead of going to his left towards the food, to the right, I got no shot. It's all this thick briar brush stuff, and there's no shot. And so he turns to the right. And right as he turns, I knew that was my only opportunity. As he was turning, I just put it right behind his shoulder and shot. I heard him do the 180 and just fly, through the branches breaking, but I never heard him crash. And I'm like, you're kidding me, I really believed it was a good shot. I waited, and they talk about waiting the hour, and it was the longest hour of my life. And so I get out, and I'm looking for the knock for the arrow, and I couldn't find it. I went back into his house, and all I said was, I think I got him. I think I got him. And he goes, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. So anyway, he goes, well, let's go look. And he gets ready. We get in his Ranger, and he drops me off where, the area I'd shot him. And I figured, last place I heard him was 20 yards in, so I just walk in 20 yards, and there he was. Freaking late. He only ran 20 yards. I just couldn't believe it. I hit my knees. and just I'd never seen anything like that. You know, I had no idea deer got that big. And then my father-in-law, because he couldn't walk the greatest, so he's in the side-by-side, just comes crashing through all the brush. I mean, all these little sapling trees, you know, and he's pretty particular about that side-by-side. He gets out and he says, wow, I've never seen anything like that. I called him Brian, my friend, to come help me get him out. And he came that evening. He was working. He came around 9. And we, you know, because it was so late in the season, we were worried about the rack, you know, the rack falling off. And I was so careful. I put a strap under his neck as we carried him out. When I load him in the back of the truck, I have a picture of that somewhere where we put a pillow down. Drove around, showed him to a couple friends. I remember driving, I couldn't sleep that night. Drove to IHOP. It was like 2 a.m, I think. Backed him in so we could just sit there and look out at the truck, you know. The next morning, I had made a friend that was a farmer, and his daughter was a photographer. And I wanted to show him the buck anyway, so I drove to his house. And he called her, and she was able to take some really nice photos of him, which was cool. Because I wouldn't have thought, I mean, you know, I wasn't into all that. So we were able to get some really good photos of him. It's just, you know, and I had him scored. Boone and Crockett scored him and went through that whole process. The bottom line is he ended up after the whole awards ceremony in Springfield, Missouri. They do that once every 3 years, and he went out there. I had to ship him out there, and they dropped him to 258. His net gross is 273 and 2/8. By Ed Waite from Buckmasters, and that's the score I prefer, honestly. It was just that it was back and forth so many times, and it was just frustrating. So, but it is what it is. He's over 250, right? He's a mega giant. So I sold the original to Keith Snyder, who has done an episode of this, obviously, with his unbelievable collection. And I'm happy I did. You know, he's probably one of the best guys in the industry, and then I know he'll be seen by, you know, others to be really appreciated.
This deer was actually killed by a friend of mine, and I was lucky enough for him that he wanted to see it in this collection, and his name is Dave Kopp. He's from up around Akron area, and this deer was on his father-in-law's property, and he went in there and come up with a game plan on how to harvest him, and was lucky enough to harvest this deer. But it's one of my favorite deer in the collection, just because Dave's such a great guy. He truly is one of those once-in-a-lifetime guys that you meet. He's just something special. But the deer was originally scored, and they sent him a score sheet at 287. Paneled it, and it was in the 260s, and long story short, finally, it's the biggest unicorn buck in the world. The actual point in the middle of the rack there comes out of the forehead. It's not on the antlers. It's actually coming out of the forehead. So it's a unicorn buck. It's got 15-inch tines on it. The bases are bigger than elk. I mean, they're 8 inches. And the collar's out of this world. It's kind of got snowflake or icicle, I call them, drop tines coming off the beams. But it broke off a lot of inches before he was able to harvest that deer. And it's 24, I think, 25 inches inside, and just a tremendous, tremendous whitetail. And it's 273 is what it actually ended up scoring. So it's a tremendous whitetail.